There, you're on.
Okay, I'm going to turn my phone off so it stays quiet. Hi everybody. I've been practicing holistic medicine in all of its formats really for, I hate to say it, over 33 years. And the topic that we're going to be talking about tonight is been one of my favorite things that has come down the pike in alternative medicine. But I've done a lot of herbal medicine. I've done a lot of homeopathic medicine. And I've also finally created a online nutrition course that will eventually have sections that are going to be, well, we have nutrition, but then we'll do some homeopathy. We'll learn some herbal medicine. So it's going to be a really advanced sharing of my information, sharing of my knowledge. Hopefully, that's my plan, because I'm been doing this for 33 years. And so I've learned a lot, but I need to share that. I need for people to be able to take the information and fly with it. So we're going to talk about demystifying hemp and CBD, because it's sort of like one of these hot topics that everybody talks about these days. But there's really, every time I talk to people, there's more questions than there are answers. So what we're going to be doing is demystifying it, making it so that you can understand what it's about, where it might fit in with your horses, and you know, is it something that's interesting, or is it something that you can think of for somebody else's horse? And we'll look at a few cases at the end. And but we're going to go through and really teach you what hemp is and what it can do. It's just an amazing plant. You'll hear a lot. Do we have about an hour or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just about an hour. Yep.
Okay. You can yell at me at, 10 minutes or something.
Okay, I will.
So we hear a lot of terms, and you'll hear marketing from different companies about cannabis indica or cannabis sativa. And some companies will say, well, ours is indica and it's better, or sativa and it's better. But actually, botanically, it is the same plant. And so don't worry about what they're telling you. If they're trying to make a big deal about it, it's probably a marketing hype that you may or may not want anything to do with. Because they're basically telling you they don't know what they're talking about. Botanically, if you talk to the true herbalist or the botanical scientists, it is the same plant, and it has been selectively bred over the years so that the hemp or marijuana of the 60s is totally gone. The plants that are being bred now are completely different. Still the same species, but very selectively bred. So we're going to clear up some terminology here. So we have marijuana, can be either species, that contains CBD or cannabinoids, which we will talk about in a minute, so you'll learn what those are. And it contains the THC, which is the psychoactive component. So you will get high from marijuana. If you feed it to your horse, they will get high from it too. We don't totally know the effects of the THC in horses, but we certainly don't want to be riding them if they've had some THC. Hemp is considered hemp of the cannabis indica or sativa if it has less than 0.3% THC. So that having a little bit of THC is not harmful, and it actually may be a very good thing as far as the effectiveness of the whole plant. But if you smoke or consume hemp, you'll have a headache long before you'll even think about getting high, and you really cannot get high off of it. So that's the real definition between marijuana and hemp. We're talking about the same plant. The difference is the THC content. And in the hemp, we have more room, literally, for the CBD because there isn't THC. So we also have hemp seed that comes from the hemp plant. And you can see hemp seed in the grocery store. You can find hemp seeds. We now can buy, because we can grow hemp in the United States, we can buy hemp seed in bulk. Hemp seed does not contain CBD or THC. It's possible there is a tiny trace amount of THC, but it is not enough to create any issues. We can eat hemp seeds all day long. The key is that there is no CBD. Its property, its benefit in the world is that it's high in omega-3 fatty acids. And we all hear about all the good stuff that omega-3 fatty acids do. You'll find it in flax, you'll find it in chia seed, you'll find it in various oils. But we want the omega-3 fatty acids. Hemp seeds are a great source. They also are a great source of protein and they're a great source of energy because they've got a fat content. They are legal for competition. This will become important in a little bit when we talk about some of the other components. Hemp seed is a nutritional product, protein, omega-3 fatty acids. The hemp seed oil, which we can get from hemp seeds, does not have CBD in it. And we can use hemp seed oil as a supplement that has omega-3 fatty acids. We can use hemp seed oil to dilute our CBD. We can use hemp seed oil just to add a couple tablespoons and have a nice shiny coat. We can add up to a quarter cup or more if we really want the therapeutic benefits of higher levels of the omega-3s. Hemp protein actually contains all the amino acids. It's slightly deficient in lysine, but it is an excellent non-GMO, genetically modified source of protein. So most of our protein in almost all of our products, our feeds, is corn or soybean, which is genetically modified. And that's a whole topic for another conversation. But hemp protein is not genetically modified, and it's an excellent source of protein. So you can add, if you add the whole hemp seed, you get some protein and some omega fatty acids. If you take the protein, which is left over after extracting the oil, you'll have a little bit of the quality of the oil, but you'll have mostly the protein, or you can have the oil. All of those are hemp seed products, no CBD. I think we did that one, so I'm hitting the wrong button. So cannabis for CBD or hemp for CBD is coming not from the seed, but it's coming from the female flower heads. And that is a picture of what hemp looks like when it's flowering. It's a very sticky, gooey, messy, smelly plant. But that's where the CBD portion of it, the cannabinoid, is the correct terminology. It's much easier to just say CBD, so that's what everybody calls it. The CBD content of each plant varies based on its species and growing conditions. And that's the portion that we're going to be focusing most of this evening's talk on. The interesting thing about cannabis or hemp is that it is what we call a bioaccumulator. And what that means is that it will suck up anything toxic in the soil. It essentially will help clean the soil. But if you're going to use hemp or whether it's hemp seed or CBD, you do not want anything except organically grown, because you want the hemp to be clean. You don't want all of those chemical compounds that are in the soil. The fascinating thing about hemp is there's 7,000 different uses. We're talking about one use here, more medicinal use. You can make clothing. We make food. We talked about the food. You can make hemp concrete. It just got approved for use in structural building materials. You can make all kinds of stuff. You can make automobiles out of it, make it into like a fiberglass material. All of that hemp can be grown in the toxic tobacco soil from Kentucky and Tennessee, and it will clean up that soil, but you do not ever want to be eating that. So if you go to 7-Eleven and buy the cheap CBD that they're selling you there, it's probably grown in some toxic soil, and you really don't want anything to do with it. You only want clean, organic, or sustainably grown hemp plants for eating, either seed or CBD. So how do we end up with flowers and seeds and all that kind of stuff? So over here we have our female plant with that flower on it. And the male plant produces or fertilizes the female plant. And once the female plant is fertilized, then it will go to seed. And you see this with your other plants and things that you grow. And the female plants produce seeds. So what you'll find is that people growing for CBD are trying to grow mostly female plants and not have the male plants fertilizing, doing their thing. So the plants that are allowed, that are grown for seed, are not nearly as bushy. They are being grown to grow flowers and then turn to seed. The plants that are being grown for CBD are grown really bushy and have lots of flowers on them. When you're making it, we talked about it being a bioaccumulator. We want to also extract it using either cold pressed extraction, ethanol extraction with organic ethanol, or carbon dioxide or CO2 extraction. You don't want to be using solvents to extract your hemp or your oils from it. And those solvents are things like benzene, which we really don't want to be eating. And that's, again, in the really cheap stuff. Most of it is extracted with chemicals. So what are these cannabinoids, and what is a little bit of the chemistry behind all of this? You will hear and you will see marketing about cannabinoids, and you will see companies that talk about different types. So we have CBD, which is the most common and the most prevalent in every plant. But we also have CBGs and CBEs and CBTs, and actually they have identified close to 100 different types of cannabinoids in the plant. They don't know much about many of them. They're present in the plants in trace amounts, but they actually, some of them have some very, very interesting properties. CBG in particular has some interesting properties with treating glaucoma. Seems to have a big affinity for the eye. THC is a cannabinoid. It just happens to be the psychoactive one. And that's the one that we don't want in our CBD products. But we also have, so cannabinoids are the main thing we talk about, but we also have these things called terpenes. And terpenes are the part that is the smelly part, the aromatic part. But terpenes are present in every herb and every plant. That's why you can walk past a certain plant and it has a certain smell. But the flavors, the odor, and many of the medicinal properties of any herb are part of these terpenes. So there are terpenes There's about 9 or 10 that have been identified in the cannabis plant. And we like having the terpenes in there. It gives us a little bit broader spectrum. We have a little bit better action when we have some terpenes present. They don't have to be present, but as an herbalist, because that's really where I come from and what my interest in the plant is that the terpenes are part of the whole plant and part of that synergistic effect. There's lots of terpenes. Not everyone has really been identified or has been really studied from the cannabis plant. There are also flavonoids, which you may have heard of as antioxidants, and there's at least 29 of those. All of those contribute to the healthiness of this plant. It's a pretty amazing plant what it can do. So here's a little bit more detail about the extraction methods that you want to be looking for in any company that you are purchasing your CBD from. The CO2 extraction is actually quite environmentally friendly. The equipment is a bit expensive, so not every company is using it. Ethanol is the common extraction material, and you can get organic ethanol. A lot of the herbalists and people who are making these products at home are using ethanol because you don't have to have the big fancy equipment. And the thing that we are trying to avoid are our butanes and our petrochemicals and all of our other ugly stuff that we don't want in what we're feeding. So then we come to these terms, full spectrum, broad spectrum, or isolate, and you will see the terms thrown around. The isolate is probably the most clear term because that is isolated CBD with nothing else, and it can be 100% THC free because they have isolated out a single compound or a couple of compounds chemically. A lot of people, especially as herbalists, don't feel that it works quite as well. There certainly are people who have good results with isolates, so I'm not going to say they're all bad. They are much more drug-like in the sense that it's just one compound rather than an herbal broad spectrum that has terpenes and flavonoids and other compounds in it. There is no official industry standard. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things in the CBD world that there is no federal standard. But in general, full spectrum, if it says full spectrum, there probably are traces of THC in it. Less than 0.3%. And this can happen with humans being drug tested for various jobs. You could potentially test positive. In the horse world, you cannot have CBD or THC, period, if you're competing under rules. We will get to that a little bit. We talk about the entourage effect, which is that complete herb, that everything effect that we really want. So full spectrum in many ways is the most desirable. Broad spectrum still can contain many different cannabinoids and terpenes. There's a little bit more variability as to exactly what it contains because there is no industry standard. But full spectrum and broad spectrum can be almost equally as good, and certainly perfectly acceptable to use for your horses. So the organic certification is, we're getting more and more companies truly using organic certification. It takes a long time. It takes 3 years to certify, minimum of 3 years to certify a property. And so the whole cannabis industry is still fairly new. And there are companies who are doing very good job sustainably. They're working towards organic certification. And if you're working with a company that is doing things the right way and they're growing things cleanly to organic standards, that can be perfectly acceptable. The USDA organic seal should be on products that are certified organic from start to finish. And that is optimum, or a small company that you know is doing a good job. So how does this cannabis stuff work in the body? So we have cannabinoid receptors, and guess what? We have cannabinoid receptors in every part of our bodies. Any mammal, from a mouse to an elephant to a horse to a human. This is a plant we are meant to use, which is kind of cool. When I went to vet school, believe me, they did not teach the cannabinoid or endocannabinoid system. They didn't know about it. Even now, it's not really taught yet in medical schools or veterinary schools, but it's creeping in, and we're learning more and more about it. And there's more and more research even being done in animals as to the presence of these cannabinoid receptors and where they're located. But they appear to be pretty much located the same in all species of animals. So we have our main cannabinoid receptors that we talk about, and there are many more receptors that people are beginning to study. So these are the main ones you're going to hear about, is the CB1 and the CB2. The CB1s are mainly in the brain and nervous system, but they also exist in the lungs, liver, and kidney. The endocannabinoids that we produce naturally, and we do produce them, and our THC bind with the CB1. The other thing to note is, because there are cannabinoid receptors in every system, it means that CBD has the possibility of interacting with almost every system in our body. And we're still learning, because research hasn't been allowed to be done, we're still learning what affects and what systems can be really helped with it. In general, our CB1 is going to be relief from pain, nausea, and depression. That's just touching the surface. The CB2 receptors are generally part of the immune system. Well, how many of our diseases are immune system related? The spleen, the intestinal system, 70% of our immune system lines our gut, and the horse's gut as well. And we're learning a tremendous amount about the horse's gut, the microbiome. And in fact, the cannabinoids, the herbs, and many other herbs besides hemp, also interact with the immune system and the microbiome. So we're finding out that many herbs that we give actually are changing the microbiome, not just working on the intestinal tract. And so our CB2 receptors are more going to be involved with appetite, with gut health, inflammation, but also some pain management. So what do we do with all of this now? There's a lot of different things, and we are still finding out. Because we still don't know every place that this can work, sometimes you just give it a try and see if it does help your particular animal. The way to think about the endocannabinoid, the ECS receptors, is think of it as the relax, eat, sleep, protect, and forget system. We have our fight and flight system. We know about that. If you have horses, you know about that. They tend to flight very easily. And the balance, everything in the body has a balance. We just never really studied it. So we have the fight or flight, and we have the relax, forgive, and forget system, which is why you will hear about CBD being helpful for PTSD type of brain or mental effects. And I use it in horses quite a bit because we have a lot of PTSD horses that have been through stressful previous lives and have significant PTSD effects. This is the balance to fight or flight. So we have both. Relax, eat, sleep, protect, forget. And what happens, anybody who might have possibly partaken of some marijuana, what do? You relax, you eat, you got the munchies, and you forget about whatever it was you were supposed to be doing. So CBD can have that effect, but without the psychoactive, less functional aspect, shall we say, of life. The other thing about it is that the endocannabinoid system is really about balance rather than stimulating something. It's about rebalancing the system. And again, it's the opposite of the fight or flight. It's the balance. It's the steady things up rather than stimulate. We're not stimulating the immune system, we're supporting the immune system. So legalities. I don't know what Indiana's legalities are. Every state is different and every state is subject to change. Technically, hemp and marijuana are considered a Schedule I drug, which means there is no medicinal quality and a high probability of addiction. Well, marijuana really is not fit into that, even as a potent source of THC. So federally, though, that has not changed. So for a lot of veterinarians, and in some states, they don't really consider that veterinarians should be talking about hemp. The sad part about that is that you really want your veterinarian to know what you're giving your horse. And if there are some states, and I think a lot of this is relaxing a bit, but there are some states where it can still be an issue. There are states where the vets are not allowed to talk to their clients about CBD, and you'll find the vets very reticent to talk about it. In other states, the states have recognized that the veterinarian needs to be involved. They don't have to necessarily prescribe it, but they should at least be involved. So there are states, because I have the Doc's Hemp company that was at the beginning. I wanted to bring CBD to the market in a way that I knew the source and the quality of what I was giving. There are some states that I cannot ship hemp or CBD, and there are some states, including California, I cannot even ship hemp seeds. So the rules are all over the map, and it's up to you to find out what happens in your state. Here's the big question. Can you use CBD products during equine competition? The big answer is no. No way, shape, or form. This is a really easy compound to test for. Some of the compounds that are on the list for the FEI or state or federal testing occur, like we talked about the terpenes. Many of the terpenes that are in CBD are also in a whole pile of other herbs. They're also in the herbs/weeds that our horses eat in the fields. So there are ingredients that you'll find, if you look at the FEI list, there'll be an herb you're not allowed to use. But the reality is they can't test for it because its terpenes that they're testing for also occur in alfalfa, and they occur in, plantain and a whole bunch of other herbs that the horses are eating in the field. CBD and THC are not like that. They are very easy to test for. The competitions are looking for it. You certainly, if there's no drug testing happening, there's no reason not to use it if your horse is doing really well on it. But if you're riding under rules, we're saying at least 5 days out before you go. 7 days is totally safe. We don't know the withdrawal time officially. And so you want to be safe because they are looking for it. So when you're going to go and select a company to buy products from, transparency is the key. And if if you're growing it or you've got a local herbalist, you can do your own thing. You know where it's coming from. If you're purchasing ready-made products, there is third-party testing, and all the reputable companies will post what's called a COA, Certificate of Analysis, for every batch that's up there. And it'll have the concentrations of the cannabinoids, the THC, any molds or bacteria present. It'll show pesticide-free. It basically will tell you everything you need to know. So all the reputable companies post those nowadays. And they're usually pretty easy to find on their website, or you just email the company and ask for a copy of it. Sometimes they don't get updated right away because a new batch comes in, and you email the company and they'll be happy to give it to you. And any company that tries to hide it or won't give it to you, move on. You can find somebody who will. Then you come to reading the labels. How much of this stuff am I going to give? You have to look carefully at the actual CBD content. So you can have 50, this is example that I have here, 50 milligrams of a hemp extract, but you might only have 15 milligrams of CBD. So the dosing will tell you that you're giving 50 milligrams of a hemp extract, but when you look at the fine print, it'll say, every ml has 50 milligrams of hemp extract. It has 15 milligrams of CBD, which is not a whole lot. So if that were the case, you could have a bottle that says 3,600 milligrams, but you might only have 1,000 actual milligrams of CBD in that whole bottle. The other stuff is an extract of hemp, but it's not CBD. So your CBD dosing can be confusing. And if you're not seeing results, sometimes you do need to just increase the dose. Other times you need to look at the product in a little bit more detail and see what the actual dose is of CBD that you're giving. You might find out that it's actually pretty low. So for horses, now we get into the much more fun stuff, the more practical stuff. But this should give you a good understanding of CBD and be able to understand the various hemp products that are coming out on the market. Horses are extremely responsive to CBD. In many cases, they're taking the same dose as people. Sometimes they respond to even less. We don't know much about THC doses. I have had some clients who got their own THC-based products for some of the laminitis horses and seemed to feel that it did better. There's a vet down in Chile, I think, who is using some THC concentrations because it's legal there in his really sick horses in his clinic and is being successful. But at the present time, we don't have a lot of data on it. Generally, you can feed CBD as an oil. And we'll talk about the actual dosing, or you can feed it as a powder, or you can feed it as a pellet. The powders and pellets are often more economical. I prefer the powders myself because there's no filler. Most of the pellets have fillers and oftentimes mold inhibitors or things like that that will actually, as far as I can tell, they're needed because of the pelleting process. I prefer to keep stuff as simple as possible. And you have the CBD extracted, you have it processed through the CO2 or the ethanol, but you still have it present on the leaf. Feeding, you will hear people say it's best to give CBD either as an oil or as a pellet away from food. The actual research shows that feeding CBD with food, particularly when there are fats involved, and many feeds have some degree of fat in them, that your CBD is actually better absorbed, and that's true across all species. But there's still a little bit of a myth out there that it's better to give it away from food. I think that that's an incorrect bit of science. So the actual administration, and what you have to think about is this comes down a lot of times to quality of product. And there's a lot of CBD coming out of China and probably South America and other places. My experience has been high quality CBD for most horses, a dosing of around 25 milligrams is kind of a base level to see whether it's going to work. Horses that are sensitive, I have horses that do fine on 15 milligrams or do the normal doses like twice a day, but I have many horses that might do twice a day for the first month, maybe 2 months, and then they go to once a day. So they're basically on half the dose. You can increase the amount. The cool thing with CBD, not always cool for your pocketbook, because quality CBD is not cheap, but there is no unsafe level of dosing. And there are people who have had horses, say in clinic situations, that have gone up to 1,000 milligrams of CBD. Usually that would be if you're growing it, it's easier to afford. But for a crisis kind of situation, you cannot injure an animal by increasing the dose of CBD, especially if you do it over several weeks. But even if they get into the bag and eat the whole thing, there is nothing in it that will cause an overdose or an illness. They might get a little diarrhea, but it is not harmful. So there are horses with more severe problems that you can just continue to increase the dose. And I tell people to play around with it, increase it, decrease it, and see what works for your horse. I usually try to do the increase or decrease 7 to 10 days. 14 days is nice. Most of us are not patient enough to wait that long, but 7 days gives you a decent idea if you're having a good response. So what I'm going to do is show you some clinical cases where I have used it, because I think that that helps people think about different ways that it can be used. Usually, you'll see some response in the first 1 to 2 to 3 weeks. When you get out to 4 weeks and you've seen nothing, it may be that it's that dose that's not enough. And it may be that, much as I love this plant, it does not cure everything. I'm still looking for the silver bullet, and I have not found it yet. This is close. It does an amazing amount of things, but nothing works in every single animal. So we'll talk a little bit about the PTSD aspect. There are so many horses that we get that have been through abusive backgrounds, either tough training, abuse issues where horses have been rescued. This particular Arabian mare, she had some poor management issues at the farm, but the abuse in her came from the other horses because the barn owner didn't seem to get that he needed to keep her separate. And the other horses would just get her in a corner and beat her up. And when I started, I'd worked on her off and on over quite a few years, and I could work on her body. And then I think a new horse was introduced and the whole situation got much worse. I went out to see her, I couldn't even touch her, much less consider doing any chiropractic or any kind of body work. Sometimes I would just do Linda Tellington Jones T-touch work on her. I couldn't even do that. She was pacing the field. She was losing weight because she wouldn't rest. She couldn't stop. It was like she couldn't stay still because she was so afraid of getting beat up. So 2 weeks, 25 milligrams twice a day. And she was a small horse. She was probably 900, barely 1,000 pounds. But after 2 weeks, I was actually able to touch her, do chiropractic on her gently. I couldn't touch her lower legs, but I could touch her upper legs. And she had actually started to gain a little bit of weight, even in those 2 weeks. And I think some of it was her body was relaxing a bit, but she would graze and she would stand still and relax in parts of the field. And then she would get agitated, walk around for a little bit, but she could actually stop. And this was a pretty amazingly serious case. And the change in this mare was phenomenal. And she really did go on after this to improve significantly. Her situation didn't change as much as I, or even the owner, was in a situation where she couldn't really move the horse. Very complicated situation, but the mare actually was able to function with the CBD. And I have used it in many different levels of anxiety, PTSD, horses that don't settle well, horses that don't settle in pastures well with pasture mates. And it definitely does not solve every emotional problem that horses have, but it is amazing to me how many times it makes a difference, and in many cases a significant difference. So it's well worth trying. And if you're competing under rules, but you have a horse you think can benefit, it's not like, unless you really are competing every weekend, you often have 2 or 3 weeks or a month in between major competitions where you can use a product like this, knowing that you're going to take it away 7 days out. And the interesting thing is that you're actually changing that endocannabinoid system. And so in many cases, what happens is you may find you don't need it all the time. You only need it at certain times, and that your horse will carry on 7 days later and is still much less anxious, much more ready to work in that competition type situation. So some of the horses that have to be confined more and don't deal with a lot of confinement, because horses are really made to be out and to be able to interact with other horses. Hemp CBD can be something that can help them deal with that kind of a situation. General other forms of mental calming. This was a 12-year-old quarter horse gelding. He came from, we don't quite know what kind of background exactly. He was probably more shut down when he was purchased, so it seemed like he was really easy, but I think that part of it was that he had just shut down and decided that he would deal with life by not interacting. He kind of woke up in his new home and ended up having a little bit of more of an attitude than people really wanted. More difficult to ride. He did have Lyme disease, and treating him for Lyme improved him quite a bit. But he did not have a great temperament. And so he was probably 2 to 3 weeks on his 25 milligram twice a day. He actually became a very civilized citizen. And then people sort of forgot to order some more, and he went off of it, and he was off of it for probably a couple of months, and they called me up and they said, he's just getting really grumpy again. And I said, when did, is he still on the hemp? And they went, oh, the hemp, we forgot. And so they started him back on it. So he was kind of like his own control, which is one way to know whether it's working. Sometimes you take them off of it for a little while and then put them back on and see what happens. And you go, oh, yeah, they actually are much better off this way. CBD is known for its use with arthritis, musculoskeletal pain, back pain. I have used it so many times on horses with musculoskeletal pain, whether they're old or young. In many cases, I sort of consider that it's like my old horse tonic, because it not only helps with musculoskeletal pain, but it helps some with gut health. It helps some with the immune system, which is often getting older. We have a lot of horses that have insulin resistance or Cushing's or PPID, and their immune system isn't great. Well, this is going to help support that immune system. The other thing that's kind of interesting is that CBD, there's actual research that shows that CBD has a positive effect on bone metabolism. We tend to use a lot of OSPHOS type of drugs, which these drugs actually have a negative effect on bone metabolism and strength. And what you can have is bone, it may become more dense, it may become less painful, but it actually can become more brittle. And bones don't necessarily heal as well. We don't have a ton of fractures in horses, but if we get a fracture in a horse that's been on OSPHOS for a long time, it's not a good thing. It does not tend to heal very well. And so I think if horses are on that type of a drug, I think feeding them some CBD to help improve their bone metabolism is a good idea. We don't have direct research on that, but we definitely have more and more concerns about the effects of the OSPHOS on bone metabolism. And we have research that shows that CBD alters bone metabolism because we have CBD receptors in our bones. Navicular disease, which is another musculoskeletal thing. This is a horse that has, was diagnosed with navicular caudal heel pain, whatever it is that you want to call it. This one actually did have, I don't think it had an MRI imaging, but it had some good ultrasound imaging. And he's still doing great. And he stays on. He needs his CBD twice a day to maintain his soundness, but he's staying sound and totally functional. Skin is an interesting aspect because we have CBD receptors in the skin. This is a 14-year-old quarter horse. She had serious soundness problems. So she was on some drugs. She was on quite a lot of drugs, actually, and serious bone disease. You would not want to look at her x-rays. She was pasture sound, and we added the hemp. We actually were able to decrease some of her levels of anti-inflammatory drugs, not completely remove them, but decrease them quite a bit. And she stayed pretty comfortable. But the interesting thing was we'd had a drought during the summer, and after a drought, when it starts raining again, and then we ended up with really rainy conditions, every other horse in the barn had rain rot, and this little chestnut mare, sensitive skin, had none. Her coat was shiny, healthy, and no rain rot lesions at all. So I feel very strongly, because she'd been in this barn for a while under similar management conditions. The biggest change in her was the hemp. So is it going to stop every horse from having rain rot? Not necessarily, but I think it can have a positive effect on skin health. EPM, this is definitely not a proven use for CBD. We have receptors in the nervous system, but it is something to consider when you have a horse with EPM. This 25-year-old warm blood mare lived to be 32, maybe even 33. She just passed away this year. She was badly windswept behind when we started her with the hemp. And for the most part, over this one, 4 or 5 years, 6 years probably, she had occasional relapses, but she was able to trot and canter in the field pretty much until into her 30s. So it's worth looking at. Again, if you're not seeing a response, you can stop spending your money. The insulin resistant and PPID, I think you'll see quite a few claims that this is going to fix your metabolic issues. I will not say that I have felt that it has cured or fixed the metabolic issues. I think it is something that can help these horses' immune systems. Their coats tend to be better. Their feet have a tendency to do better. But I've had some laminitic horses where, I mean, we probably would have to get up to 200, 300, 400 milligrams. And if you look at some of the packaging with some of the lesser expensive products, you'll see things like 100 milligrams per dose or 200 milligrams per dose. I don't find that many of those work that much better than the 25 milligram of a high quality product. And they don't necessarily work any better in a laminitis case than, say, 50 milligrams or 75 milligrams of a high quality product. But it has not been as satisfactory to me with the laminitis, or as helpful as I would have hoped, because of the pain relief from some other things.
We're getting close here, so
Okay,
okay, about
just a couple
5
more
more minutes.
slides.
Perfect.
Lyme disease, and I can kind of go through it quickly. Lyme disease is, CBD is like made for Lyme disease. It's anti-inflammatory, it supports the gut, it supports the liver, it has a positive effect on the mental aspects, and that is a big part of my Lyme treatment protocol for horses. Laminitis I talked about. I've had some cases where it really helps, but I've had a lot of cases where I've been more frustrated than pleased with it. And head shakers. This is an interesting use of it, and maybe a very positive use. Most of the head shakers that I have treated with it have done well, maybe not 100%, but have done really well year over year. And so that is now one of my first lines for head shakers. Not 100%, but close. Ulcers, the same kind of thing. It helps with the anti-anxiety effect. It doesn't necessarily fix the ulcer itself, but to me, it is supporting the anxiety that often contributes to ulcers. So it can be very complementary to other herbal or drug use. So horses like this plant, and they are good herbalists, and they seem to know what they need. So give it a try. Well, that's it.
Hey, any questions from anyone in the audience? Go ahead and turn your voice on if you'd like to ask a question. Any questions? Man, I have a lot of questions, but I don't even know where to start. Okay. That I for people, does it have the same effects that it has on horses with people?
Absolutely. This
Really?
this crosses all species, horses, dogs, cats. The old cats I have on it, my old cats don't die. They won't die. It's like they're 18, 19. Um, they just keep going. Uh, Cats, dogs, horses, mice, guinea pigs, we all have an endocannabinoid system, all mammals.
How do you pick a good one? I mean, you talked about I have one in my hand right now that has was says it was CO2 extracted.
Mm-hmm.
Um I
Organic.
yeah, it's organic.
Mm-hmm.
I have it for me, okay, but I can use the same for my horse, right?
It's all the same. It's all
Okay.
and a good quality organic horse stuff. I mean, I put my own Doc's hemp stuff in. I take it myself. I put it in my smoothie, whatever. I put the powder in my smoothie. I take the oils myself. It's the same organic. It's human grade. We're not really supposed to put that kind of stuff on a label, so you don't see too many companies doing it. But if they're doing organic, CO2 extracted, or even organic ethanol extracted, it will be the same, human or horse.
Wow. This has
The
been very,
labeling is supposed to be different if it's for humans.
yeah. This has been very different. Kristen says, thank you so much. It's been very informative without trying to sell us anything so much like so much of the information out there on this subject. Because she's right. Every time I've seen and read anything about CBT at the end of the whatever avenue they use, they've got the one they want to sell you.
Yeah, and the
Thank
thing is that there really are a lot of good companies out there now. When I got started, there really wasn't. Now there is.
Good.
And small companies, big companies, I don't trust some of the really big ones that are trying to sell you huge high doses as much because I think it's coming out of China and it's um a lot of times it's not even marked organic. But there are tons of good companies now. There really are.
Well, thank you so very much. We're going to have this on our website, and I am sure word of mouth is going to have people going to look at it.
Great.
Um, thank you for your patience with getting started, and we would love to have you come back.
Sure. I got lots of things. And you can have a peek at my website and see all the things that I do.
Yeah. Well, I will do
There's a lot of educational, free educational material on my website about all different topics. A lot of stuff about Lyme, insulin resistance, pasture management, all kinds of stuff besides the course. I mean, there's just a ton of free stuff out there
yeah.
and articles and blogs and
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn off the recording, and um, we will be talking to you soon.
great. Sounds good.